guys, it's Ashley and welcome to day 5 of my 12 days of BOOKMAS video marathon. Today, on Christmas Eve, depending on the time zone that you're in, we're going to be talking about every book that I put on my TBR this year that I said I would read and then didn't read. Because I love to make fun of myself on this channel. I literally went through and rewatched all of my TBRs from January to December and picked out every book that I had put on that TBR that I never got around to. As you can tell, my side table is like down here. You can't even see my hands, so this is a tall stack of books here. I'm gonna go in order from January to December. There are a couple of months that I just completely did not make TBRs for because I just didn't read anything those months, and also I think that was when I took a little bit of a break this year from video making. So we're just gonna, go with it as it comes. That's not the saying, but it's fine. Let's just get started. So first up is January, and surprisingly, I read everything that I had mentioned on that January TBR. Granted, I didn't read them all in January. For instance, I think I put The Hand on the Wall in my January TBR, and I didn't read that story until like July, but I still read every book that I had put on that TBR, which is kind of astonishing to me considering every TBR after that I have a 1 or 2 or all the books that I mentioned that I didn't get to. So that's fun, but yay me for starting the year off strong and then just slowly going downhill from there. So in February, I just had 2 books on the TBR that I had mentioned that I did not get around to. I put P.S. I Still Love You on that TBR for some reason, and I think that's because the movie version was coming out that month and I wanted to reread it to prepare for that. I didn't reread it, mostly because I'm not as big of a fan of the series as I used to be when I first read it. And then the next book that I talked about in that February TBR video was Amy and Roger's Epic Detour by Morgan Matson, which, why did I bring this up? I don't have this book. I've never had really an interest in reading it other than, I guess, for some reason in February. I have no idea. To be honest, I didn't rewatch these videos in full. I just kind of skipped through and got to the books. So if I made a mention of why I wanted to read that in that video, I didn't hear it. Maybe it's because it was one of the only Morgan Matson books I've never read other than Second Chance Summer, but regardless, I've had no inclination to read this since I put it in that video. And I was honestly surprised that it was even in there when I rewatched it, so that's fun. So from March until June, I had no video, no TBR, no reading plans whatsoever. So we're just gonna skip those months and move on to July. So in July, I had 1 book that I talked about that I did not end up getting to, and that book is Aru Shah and the Tree of Wishes by Roshni Chokshi. This is the 3rd book in the Pandava series, I'm pretty sure it's called. It's basically Percy Jackson, but Hindu mythology following the reincarnations of the Pandava brothers, and it's so good. This series just gives me so many Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson feels, whereas some of the other Rick Riordan Presents books are very different from Percy Jackson, but this one is done in such the same vein that it just feels like you're reading the Hindi version of Percy Jackson, and it's so, so good. So highly recommend. I read the 2nd one this year, actually. I just never got around to the 3rd. And then August is where things start going downhill. So in August, I said that I wanted to reread The Red Scrolls of Magic to prepare for The Lost Book of the White, but I ended up reading The Lost Book of the White without rereading this book, so I'm not really sure whether I could call this a win or a fail, but I said I would and I didn't, so we're gonna put it on this list. And then we have the bane of my existence this year, An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir, which I said literally 3 times in 3 different months that I was going to reread and then never did. This series, I will finish it in 2021. I swear to you. I desperately want to finish this series so badly. I just haven't because for some reason I just want to read so many other books rather than picking this up for the 3rd time to reread it because I just can't be bothered to finish the series when I reread it the first time. So that's just bad on my part. I apologize, and it will happen next year, I promise you. And then I mentioned 3 adult fiction stories that I wanted to read because I had them on hold at the library, but I never got around to them. The first one is The Lion Game by Ruth Ware, which is an adult thriller that my mom wanted to read, so I put it on hold at the library and we just never read it. The next one is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, which is also another adult thriller, I believe, or horror or whatever it's called, that again, my mom wanted to read and we just never got around to it. And then the third one is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng, which I actually wanted to read myself. This had nothing to do with my mom, and then I just never read it. Mostly because I read Little Fires Everywhere, which I've mentioned multiple times in these videos so far because I loved that story, and I wanted to read Celeste Ng's other book, and then I never did, which is the theme of this video. I had been like pushing off my holds constantly until I would get around to them, and then eventually I just realized that I wasn't going to get around to them, so I, took them off hold. But I was doing that for a very long time, probably like months after, what month are we in? August? Months after August, I realized I was not going to get around to these books anytime soon and finally took them off hold. But yeah, it was a process for me to figure that out. So September came around and there are only 2 books on this list that I said I would get to and then did not read. The first of which is a book I actually have, but I forgot it on my shelf and I really don't feel like getting up right now, so I'll put it here. That is The Firekeeper by J.C. Cervantes, which is the second book in the Stormrunner trilogy. I read the first book last year or in 2018, I can't remember, and then I never finished the series, and the last one came out this year, and I thought, wow, I can read the second book and then get to the third book and just finish it finally. And of course, why would I do that? The Firekeeper is 110% a book that is going on my TBR next year. I will finish the series. I swear, so many of the things that I'm going to be reading next year are continuations of series and also fantasy books. That's my goal, which I will talk about more in my reading resolutions video, which is going to be the last video of this sort of marathon thing. But I have goals for next year, I will accomplish them. And then the second book that I mentioned in September is none other than, you guessed it, An Emperor in the Ashes by Samba Tahir, which I didn't read and we're just gonna put aside now before I have to make myself feel shame any more than I already do. Okay, so then we get into October, and in October, this is where I fucked up. Because I put so many books on my TBR that month because I was determined that I was going to read spooky, creepy, thrilling books that month because October, right? And I was really in that mood and I was like, ooh, you know what I'll do? I'll fill my TBR up with a bunch of short-ish, sort of scary, creepy books, and I'll do a week-long readathon where I read nothing but spooky books and it'll be fun. And guess what I did? None of that. So I'm just gonna go through all of these books that I put on my TBR that month very quickly. We're just gonna do a speed round here, okay? Here we go. Sadie by Courtney Summers, which has to do with a podcast and a girl that went missing and a sister that died, and a bunch of people are looking for her, but we also follow her perspective, and I read half of it and then didn't finish, but I have it and I wanted to read it and I didn't. Night Books by J.A. White, which is a middle grade about a kid who gets captured by a witch and then has to escape. Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power, which I have no idea what this is about. Literally all of the Get underlined paperbacks that are kind of spooky and thrilling and I really wanted to read in October and then just didn't, but I do still want to read these really badly because they're short and they seem like a good time. The Cousins by Karen M. McManus, which honestly I might still read sometime soon. I'm kind of feeling this one and it's still kind of spooky, but I don't care if it's December or not. I actually kind of want to read this for some reason right now. The Archived by Victoria Schwab, which has been on my TBR for years and I have not read it and I still know next to nothing about it other than that there's a library of the dead, and that's the only thing that I can ever say when I talk about this book. And finally we have House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig, which I started to read and then stopped reading because I just was not into this story very much. And now we come to November because I realized that I did not film a December TBR because I wanted to give myself the freedom to explore whatever I wanted to read rather than pick a TBR, and that did nothing for me because I have read next to nothing this entire month, which is great. So, first up on that November TBR, which I did not get to, which will be no surprise to you, and that is The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. I'm not going to talk about this. I've talked about it so much. Second book in the Mistborn trilogy. I never got to it. Then we have These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, which I still really want to read very badly and is going to be on my immediate TBR for 2021. This is a 1920s in Shanghai story retelling Romeo and Juliet, and it sounds amazing. Then I said that I wanted to get to The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern because I had read The Night Circus and really loved that story, but lo and behold, never got around to it. What else is new? Another book that I kept talking about and that I never got around to, Fire by Kristen Kishore. Again, another book on my TBR for next year. You can see a pattern here. I also said that I would really have loved to reread The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell because The Serpent's Curse, which is the third book in this series, comes out next year. It was supposed to come out this year, but because of COVID, we didn't get it. And I still want to reread this series because it's been a while and I want to be fresh and up to date when that third book comes out because the series is so good. It's so good, you all. You haven't heard me talk about this already. It's kind of like people with powers in the 1900s in New York, and this girl is like a time-traveling thief, and she goes back in time to join this like gang to get this book that's going to help them in the future or something. It's so good. Like, if you haven't read the series yet, do it. It's so freaking good. And then the last book that I don't actually have that I mentioned on that TBR was Aurora Burning by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, which, you guessed it, is also on my TBR for next year. This is the second book in the Aurora Cycle trilogy or series. Sorry, all of these books were just about to fall off my lap. I don't really actually know what the series is called, to be honest with you. I just know that it's the second book to Aurora Rising, and that book was really good, and I've been wanting to read the second one and just haven't yet. And I think those are all of the books. It's really sad that I felt the need to make a video like this, but like, who actually makes a strict TBR and then sticks to every single book on that TBR? Like, give me one person. And by that, I don't actually mean give me a person. I don't want to be like shamed any more than I already am for not reading these books. So don't tell me if somebody does that. I don't want to know. Kudos to them, but that's not how it works for me. Let me know in the comments any of your books that you said you were going to get to this year and then didn't, and let me know if you're planning on reading them next year or not. But other than all of that fun time that I just went through embarrassing myself, I think that's gonna be it for this video. So if you want to follow me on any of my socials, all my handles are in the description. Thank you so much for watching day 5 of my 12 days of BOOKMAS marathon, and I will catch you later. Bye!